The most expensive car in the room belonged to her. The most expensive mind in the room belonged to him. And the only one who didn't know that was her. On the morning that Cassandra Vale brought her $2 million prototype to a Detroit garage, on the wrong side of progress, she thought she was slumming it for a photo opportunity. She thought the footage would look good in the quarterly investor package. Aureon Motors, giving back to local American workers. Blue-collar roots, humble origins. All the language her communications team had already drafted. What she did not think, not even for a single passing moment, was that the man walking toward her with grease on his hands and a shop rag on his shoulder was the same man whose name had been quietly erased from the patent that was about to make her company worth 11 figures. She was wrong about almost everything that morning, and she would spend the next several weeks understanding, in careful detail, exactly how wrong she had been. Drop a comment, and let us know where you're watching it from. Because this story starts in a garage in Detroit, and ends with the truth that was never supposed to come out. The sign above the bay doors read Turner & Sons Auto Repair, in letters that had once been dark blue, and were now the pale, faded gray of something that had survived a long time, in weather it wasn't built for. The building itself was low, 2 bay doors, a small office with a window that looked out onto the parking lot, a single security camera mounted above the entrance, pointing at the concrete apron where cars came and went. The parking lot held 3 vehicles, a 1989 Chevrolet Silverado that hadn't moved in months, an older Buick with a cracked windshield, and a 1966 Ford Mustang in a state of permanent and loving restoration. Inside the first bay, flat on his back beneath the raised chassis of a pickup truck, was Elias Turner. He was 48 years old, 6 feet 2 inches, and built the way men are built when they have spent decades doing actual work with their bodies. His hands were large and precise, the knuckles scarred in the specific way that comes from decades of close contact with metal and heat. He wore dark work pants, steel-toed boots, a white undershirt, and an unzipped navy coverall with the name Turner embroidered above the chest pocket in thread that had once been gold. He was listening to the truck, not the engine. The engine was off. He was listening to the chassis, to the faint tick of cooling metal, to the way the suspension settled under its own weight. He had a habit of listening to machines before he touched them, the way a doctor listens to breathing before asking where it hurts. His father had taught him that. His father had taught him a great many things inside this building, and most of them had turned out to be true. Elias slid out from beneath the truck when he heard the sound of the flatbed arriving. Not because the flatbed was unusual. Cars came in many different ways in his experience, but because the sound of the transport vehicle was accompanied by a second sound, and then a third. Doors. Multiple doors. The kind that close the way expensive things close, with a soft, deliberate finality that ordinary doors don't bother with. He stood. He pulled the shop rag from his shoulder, wiped his hands without looking at them, and walked to the bay door. The flatbed carried a car he recognized immediately, not because he had seen photographs of it, though he had, but because he recognized the architecture of it. The Aureon V-Nine was a sleek, silver electric vehicle, a prototype, a pre-production unit that had not yet been released to the public. It sat on the transport deck like a piece of industrial sculpture, its lines clean and low, its surfaces catching the gray Detroit morning and returning it as something colder and more perfect. Elias looked at the car for a long moment. Then he looked at the woman stepping out of the black SUV that had arrived behind it. Cassandra Vale was 41 years old, dressed in an ivory pantsuit that had no business being anywhere near a working garage, and she moved with the particular confidence of someone who had spent enough time in important rooms that she had stopped noticing whether a room was important or not. Behind her came 2 assistants, a communications team member with a camera, a security person, and a man in a technical jacket, whom Elias recognized as Nolan Pierce, though Nolan had not yet recognized him. Cassandra looked at the garage. The people look at things they have already decided are beneath them. This is where they brought it, she said to no one in particular, though the words were clearly intended to be heard. The flatbed operator began the process of lowering the Aureon to the concrete, and Elias walked forward. He stood about 10 feet from the car, not moving toward it, just standing, and he listened. The car was making a sound. It was very faint, something most people would not have caught. A low-frequency harmonic from the battery housing, the kind of sound a pack makes when it has experienced thermal stress, and the cells are still negotiating with the ambient temperature. Elias knew that sound. He had designed the system that was supposed to prevent it. "Don't restart it," he said. Cassandra turned and looked at him. Her expression was the expression of someone who has just noticed a piece of furniture has spoken. "Excuse me?" "The car," Elias said. He had not raised his voice. He did not need to. "Don't restart it." Cassandra looked at the garage sign, then at Elias, then back at the garage sign, as if she were running a quick calculation about whether this situation was real. "And who are you?" "The person who can hear it overheating." She studied him for a moment, the coverall, the grease, the quietness, and something in her posture shifted toward a kind of impatient dismissal. "This vehicle is a $2 million prototype. It uses proprietary electric architecture. I don't think a restart warning from a general mechanic is something our engineering team needs to prioritize." "Your engineering team isn't here," Elias said. That was true. The technical unit from Aureon was 45 minutes behind schedule, stuck in traffic on I-75. What had arrived was the car, the communications team, and Nolan Pierce, who was the chief technical officer, and who had, until approximately 30 seconds ago, been answering emails on his phone. Nolan looked up. He saw Elias Turner. For a moment, nothing moved in Nolan's face. Then everything moved at once. Color, expression, the set of his jaw, and then he made it stop and his face became careful again. But it had happened. Elias had seen it. "You know this man?" Cassandra asked, because she had seen it too. Nolan hesitated in the way that people hesitate when any answer they give is going to cost them something. "He used to be in the industry," Nolan said. Cassandra's gaze moved back to Elias. She gave him a second look, a longer one, and in it Elias could feel the exact distance she was placing between the coverall and the idea of competence. "Which industry?" "Same one you're in," Elias said. She laughed. It was a short, light sound, not cruel exactly, but the kind of laugh that doesn't think about what it's landing on. "I'm going to need my engineers here before anyone touches that vehicle. No offense to local shops, but that car is 24 hours away from the most important product launch in this company's history." "I know," Elias said. Cassandra's eyes narrowed very slightly. "How would you know that?" He didn't answer. He walked to the Aureon and crouched beside the front wheel well, pressing 2 fingers lightly against the body panel just above the rocker. The metal was warmer than it should have been, given that the car had been sitting on the flatbed for 20 minutes in 53-degree air. "Get away from the car," Cassandra said. Her voice had changed. The lightness was gone. Elias stood. He looked at her without hostility. "The thermal buffer is running at deficit. Your battery housing is holding residual heat from whatever you put it through during the commercial shoot. If someone restarts it right now, the system will attempt a cold initialization while the cells are still hot, and it will lock. Not lock like a flat tire, lock like a door that isn't going to open." Cassandra stared at him. Then she looked at Nolan. Nolan said nothing. "You know what the problem with people like you is," Cassandra said, and her voice had taken on the specific quality of someone who has decided to make an example of a situation. "You fix a few old engines and you think you understand the future." The camera operator from the communications team shifted slightly. Lena Brooks, the independent journalist, who had been invited to document the PR piece, and who had been standing off to one side, taking notes in a small spiral notebook, stopped writing. The young mechanic who worked with Elias, a 23-year-old named Deshawn, who had been pretending to organize a tool chest in the back of the second bay, went very still. Elias said nothing. He was looking at the badge on the front of the Aureon, the small silver A inside a hexagon. He had been looking at it since the car came off the flatbed. He had designed the system inside that car. He had drawn it, written it, tested it, argued for the thermal mercy layer. When the investors said it cost too much performance margin, and explained 12 different ways why a car that could protect its own passengers was worth more than a car that could go from 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. He had been 26 pages into a patent application when his business partners had called an emergency board meeting and restructured the company in a way that left him outside it. "Don't touch my car," Cassandra said. "I don't want a garage mechanic anywhere near that vehicle. We'll wait for our own team." She turned away. Elias looked at the Aureon one more time. The sound from the battery housing had changed slightly. It was quieter now. That was not a good sign. That meant the cells were no longer venting. They were containing. He went back inside. He was not angry. He had practiced not being angry about this particular category of thing for a long time, and he had gotten good at it. What he felt instead was something more specific. The steady, cold weight of a man who knows something important is about to happen, and has been told he is not allowed to prevent it. He went to the wooden cabinet in the back of the first bay. He opened the bottom drawer. Inside, beneath a folded blue tarp, was a device that looked like nothing in particular. A black rectangular unit about the size of a hardback book, covered in handwritten labels, and connected to a single cable. He had built it himself 8 years ago from components he had salvaged from a research lab that was being decommissioned. It read the base signal layer of the Turner Pulse Core architecture, the original code signature, the thing beneath the thing that Aureon Motors had renamed Aureon Pulse architecture and presented to the world as their own invention. He set it on the workbench. He also picked up the key from its hook on the wall beside the cabinet. A single key on a worn leather fob, the key to the '66 Mustang in the parking lot, the last car his father had been working on when the diagnosis came. Samuel Turner had spent 20 years trying to restore that car to running condition, and Elias had always intended to finish it, but there was always something else first, and so the Mustang waited in the lot the way some things wait, patiently without complaint, holding its shape. Elias put the key in his coverall pocket and went back to the bay door. Outside, Cassandra's communications team had set up a small shot near the entrance. She was speaking to camera, something about Aureon's commitment to American manufacturing, something about innovation and legacy, and the working-class communities that had built the automotive industry. The Aureon V-Nine gleamed behind her in the gray light, a prop in a story it had not agreed to be part of. Nolan Pierce was standing to one side, not looking at Cassandra, not looking at the car, looking at the ground the way men look at it when they are calculating the cost of what they know. Elias walked to the edge of the bay and waited. He had been born in this city. He had grown up 3 miles from this building, in a house with a kitchen table where his father helped him with homework after 12-hour shifts. He had gone to engineering school, on a scholarship and a series of part-time jobs, had spent his 20s in research facilities and design rooms, had learned to translate between the language of machines and the language of mathematics and the language of human need. He had believed, for a time, that belief was enough, that the quality of the work would be its own protection. He had been wrong about that, and the lesson had been expensive. Samuel Turner had been sick when the investors restructured the company. It had been Elias's choice, the lawsuit or his father. The lawsuit would have taken years. His father had months. He had chosen his father, and when his father was gone, he had come back here, to the building where he had first learned what machines were, and he had stayed. People thought he had failed. He had not failed. He had chosen. The difference mattered to him, even if it didn't matter to anyone else. The communications shoot wrapped in about 20 minutes. Cassandra walked back toward the SUV, said something to one of her assistants, and the assistant relayed a message to Nolan, who came into the garage looking like a man walking towards something unpleasant. "She wants to know if there's a diagnostic port we can access," Nolan said. He was not quite meeting Elias's eyes. "There's a secondary port on the underside, driver's side rear," Elias said. Standard input won't read the base layer. You'd need the manufacturer's protocol. We have that. No, Elias said, you have the copy. Nolan looked at him then. The look was complicated. There was recognition in it and guilt, and something that might have been respect trying to find room inside a face that had spent years not making room for it. We both know what happened, Nolan said quietly. We do, Elias agreed. I was 28. I had just gotten the job. I didn't know what they were going to do with the files. You knew 2 years later, and you stayed. Nolan had no answer for that. He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at Elias. Can you tell me what you're hearing in the car? Elias told him. He kept it precise and technical, the way he always talked about machines, without drama or editorializing. The thermal buffer deficit, the cell containment pattern, the likely behavior of the system during a cold initialization attempt. The specific risk profile, if someone ran full pulse output during the launch demonstration tomorrow, without restoring the protective layer that had been disabled. When he was done, Nolan was quiet for a long moment. They disabled the third layer, Elias said. It was not a question. In demo mode, Nolan said, for performance. Victor said it was within acceptable margins. Victor's not an engineer. No, Nolan exhaled. He's not. Cassandra appeared in the bay door. She had taken off her ivory jacket and was holding it over one arm. She looked at the two of them standing together. And something shifted in her expression. Not quite suspicion, more like the irritation of someone who has been excluded from a conversation that is happening in her own space. Nolan, what's the status? He's explaining the diagnostic situation, Nolan said. We don't need a local diagnosis. I need to know if the car can be cleared and transported before 6 o'clock. If it's restarted without addressing the thermal issue, it won't be transportable, Elias said. It'll lock on ignition. Cassandra turned the full weight of her attention onto him. Up close, she was sharper than she appeared from a distance. Eyes that moved quickly and saw clearly. The kind of intelligence that had been redirected over years toward the wrong purposes. I'm going to be direct with you, she said. I don't know your name. I don't know your qualifications. And I don't know why you keep involving yourself in a situation that is above your pay grade. But I have a product launch worth $900 million in 24 hours. And I'm not going to let a general mechanic from a neighborhood shop delay it by playing expert. My name is Elias Turner, he said. Something crossed Nolan's face. Cassandra waited to see if that name was supposed to mean something to her. When it didn't register, she moved on. Mr. Turner, I appreciate your concern. I'll have my engineers here within the hour and they'll handle this. I'd ask that you step back from the vehicle. She said it the way people say things when they have decided the sentence is the end of the conversation. Elias stepped back. He picked up the device from the workbench and set it in his tool cabinet. He went back to the truck he had been working on before they arrived. He slid underneath it. He listened to the metal. The Aureon V-Nine sat in the lot. Aureon's engineers arrived 50 minutes later, 3 of them, in a white van with the company logo on the side. They ran their standard diagnostics through the approved interface and reported that the system was nominal and the vehicle was ready for transport. They were reading the copy. They were not reading the base layer. Elias heard the van doors close. He heard the flatbed come back. He heard the Aureon's transport chains engage. Then he heard Cassandra Vale speak at sufficient volume for the camera to capture. Our team has confirmed the vehicle is in perfect condition. Turner and Sons Garage provided excellent support and hospitality to the Aureon team today. We're proud to showcase the best of American craftsmanship alongside the future of electric mobility. She did not use Elias's name. She did not mention what he had said about the car. After they left, Deshawn came out from the second bay and looked at the empty lot where the Aureon had been. She's going to launch it tomorrow, Deshawn said. Yes, Elias said, and it's going to fail. Elias was quiet for a moment. He had pulled out the device from the cabinet and was looking at it. Then he opened the bottom drawer again and removed a second item, a black composition notebook with a cracked spine and a cover worn smooth from years of handling. He set it on the workbench. Inside were pages of handwritten diagrams, circuit layouts in pencil, annotated in his small, precise handwriting, thermal flow models, notes in the margins. The words Turner Pulse Core appeared on the first page, written in the same hand that had written everything else, dated more than 12 years ago. Scattered through the pages were warnings in red ink, the same phrase recurring in different contexts, different calculations, the same conclusion. Do not remove the thermal mercy layer. I'm going to the launch, Elias said. Deshawn looked at him. She said you weren't invited. She said I wasn't allowed to touch the car, Elias said. The launch is open to press and industry observers. He looked at the notebook, then he looked at the key in his pocket. He turned it over once in his palm and put it back. The Meridian Technology Center was not a room Elias Turner had ever been inside, but he knew buildings like it. He had spent years in buildings like it. High ceilings, LED stage lighting, a main floor designed to make objects look both powerful and inevitable. The Aureon V-Nine sat on a raised performance testing platform at the center of the room, silver and silent, surrounded by people who had paid significant amounts of money to be present for what was being called a pivotal moment in clean mobility. Elias had arrived early and positioned himself in the industry observer section near the technical monitoring station at the left side of the hall. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn in the garage. He had not changed them. He carried the black notebook under his arm and the device in a canvas tool bag over his shoulder. Lena Brooks was at the press table. She had been doing research since the morning. She was good at research. She had found 3 patent filings from 11 years ago that referenced a thermal control architecture she had initially assumed was standard industry language. Then she had found a separate filing from a different company, 9 years ago, using identical language with different names attached to it. She had made a note. She had made several notes. When she saw Elias walk in, she recognized him from the garage. She watched him find a position near the technical station. She watched him set his bag down and take out the device and connect it quietly to a secondary monitoring port at the edge of the technical area, the kind of port that looks like a power outlet to anyone who doesn't know what it is. She walked over. Mr. Turner. He looked at her. Brooks. I was at the garage this morning. I remember. I've been looking at patent records, she said. Turner Pulse Core, that's yours. He looked at her for a moment. It was mine, he said. It still is, they just changed the name. She wrote something in her notebook. Will you talk to me after this? You're going to have something to write about before this is over, he said. On the stage, Cassandra Vale was at the podium. She was magnificent at this. The measured confidence, the command of language, the way she made a room feel like it was being invited into something historic. She spoke about the Aureon V-Nine as though it were a statement about what the future could be when ambition and technology and intention aligned. She used the word safety 7 times in 4 minutes. She used the word innovation 11 times. In the technical monitoring station, Elias watched the readout from his device. The base layer signature was clear. The Aureon Pulse architecture was running on the Turner Pulse Core framework. Every protocol, every cascade sequence, every thermal flow decision tree, all of it traceable back to 11 years of his own work. The car recognized him, not as Elias Turner the garage mechanic, as Elias Turner the architect. The system had his signature embedded in it at the lowest level of its code structure, because that was where he had put it, on purpose, on the day he finished the first complete build, as a proof of origin that could not be removed without rebuilding the entire system from scratch. They had not rebuilt it from scratch. They had changed the name, and hoped no one would look deep enough to find the signature. Cassandra finished her prepared remarks. The room applauded. The lights shifted. The performance testing platform began its demonstration sequence, a series of controlled acceleration and response runs designed to show the V-Nine's capabilities under simulated road conditions. On the technical screen at the monitoring station, Elias watched a single line appear. TPC Layer 3 disabled. Demo mode active. The car began its first run. The numbers were extraordinary. The room made appreciative sounds. Cassandra watched from the stage, with the expression of someone watching their own vindication. Elias watched the thermal readout. The cells had been holding heat from that morning. The cold initialization had not fully resolved the deficit. Now, with the system running at demo output and the third protective layer offline, the heat was building again. Not catastrophically, not yet, but the trajectory was clear, and he could see exactly where it was going, and he knew how much time was left before it arrived. He sent a text to Nolan Pierce, "Do not run full pulse." He watched Nolan receive it from across the room, watched Nolan look at Cassandra, watched Cassandra give a small, deliberate nod. The second run began. The temperature curve on Elias's readout went non-linear. He picked up his bag. He walked toward the performance platform. A security person stepped into his path. "Sir, this area is restricted. The car is about to experience a thermal cascade failure," Elias said. "If the demonstration continues at current output, the system will lock, and the platform braking mechanism will not engage correctly." "Sir, there are 163 people in this room," Elias said. His voice was still calm. It was the calmest it had been all day. "You are standing between me and the thing I built to keep them safe." The security person looked uncertain. On the platform, a new line appeared on the main display screen. Most people in the room didn't know what it meant, but Nolan Pierce went white. Thermal mercy layer missing. Nolan turned from his position near the stage and looked across the room at the security guard and at Elias, and he made a decision that he had been not making for 9 years. "Let him through," Nolan said, loudly enough. Cassandra turned at the sound of his voice. "Nolan," the platform shuddered. It was subtle, a vibration in the floor, the kind you feel before you see it. One of the engineers near the staging area looked at his tablet and started moving faster. The security guard stepped aside. Elias walked through. He went directly to the secondary access panel at the base of the platform, the one that looked like a maintenance port, that connected to the backup control bus that ran the original architecture underneath the presented architecture. He opened it. He plugged in the device. He entered a command string from memory, 47 characters that he had written himself more than a decade ago, and had never forgotten, because some things you write so deeply into your own understanding that they become part of how you think. The screen on his device read, "Original architect override required." He placed his right thumb on the small biometric pad he had built into the device on the day he completed the Turner Pulse Core design. He had registered it at the same time he registered the patent, the same week, the same hand. The screen changed. Elias M. Turner, founder key accepted. The room was not quiet exactly, but the quality of its noise had changed. Some people were still watching the platform. Some people were watching him. Lena Brooks was recording. Elias activated the thermal mercy layer. The system received it immediately, the way a machine receives something it was always supposed to have. Not with resistance, not with delay, but with the quiet, immediate rightness of a mechanism engaging the piece it was designed around. The temperature curve on his readout began to flatten. The pulse output stepped back from the edge. The platform braking system re-engaged at full capacity. The Aureon V-Nine came to a controlled stop on the platform. The room was now completely quiet. Cassandra Vale stood at the edge of the stage. She was looking at the screen that Lena Brooks had turned toward the audience. The screen that showed the readout from the secondary access port, showing the override line, showing the founder key, showing the name. Elias Turner, founder, accepted. She was looking at it the way people look at things they have spent years not looking at, when the looking becomes unavoidable. Nolan Pierce walked across the room and stood at the edge of the technical area. He did not stand with Cassandra. He did not stand with Victor Lang, who had moved toward the exit and found it complicated by the press. "The name was removed before I joined the company," Nolan said, loudly enough for the recording. "I knew it by the second year. I stayed because I told myself the technology was what mattered. I was wrong about that. The technology and the name belonged to the same person." Lena Brooks had her camera pointed at Nolan. She had been recording since Elias walked past the security guard. Elias opened the black notebook. He turned it to the first page and held it where the nearest camera could read it. Turner Pulse Core. His handwriting, his date, his name. The diagram that matched the architecture inside the car on the platform, drawn 11 years ago in a rented workspace in a Detroit building that no longer existed. He turned a few pages to one of the red ink warnings. Do not remove the thermal mercy layer. Then he looked at Cassandra. He did not gloat. He did not perform. He did not raise his voice or make the room wait while he composed something sharp. He just looked at her, the way he had looked at machines all his life, with patience and without judgment, and with the steady attention of someone who has learned that the truth will make itself heard, if you give it enough time. You thought the problem was that I was going to touch your car, he said. But what your company did was reach inside something I built to protect people, and remove the part that did the protecting, and then you put it in a room full of people, and called it the future. The member of the Aureon board who had come to represent the company's largest institutional investor stood up from his seat in the VIP section. I want a full technical review before this room empties, he said. He was a man named Gerald Ashby, and he spoke with the quiet authority of someone who did not need volume to be understood. I want all footage from this session retained. I want Mr. Turner's documentation photographed and logged. And I want someone to tell me right now whether this company is aware that the core architecture of our primary product is under a legitimate ownership dispute. Cassandra started to speak. Victor Lang, from somewhere near the back of the room, said, Cassandra. It was a warning, not support. She stopped. The board member looked at Nolan. You said the name was removed before you joined. Who removed it? Nolan looked at the floor. Then he looked up. The founding investors, he said. The same group that brought the technology into Aureon through a restructured acquisition. They had legal documents that obscured the origin, but Mr. Turner never signed those documents. He was being handled separately, through a different channel, while the restructuring happened. Through a silence agreement, Elias said, which he never signed, Nolan confirmed. Gerald Ashby sat down and made a phone call. In the following minutes the room organized itself around what had just happened. Press moved toward the front. Engineers moved toward the platform. Security moved toward Victor Lang. Cassandra Vale stood at the edge of the stage and did not move at all, and the expression on her face was not fury, and it was not shame. It was the specific, exhausting expression of someone realizing that every resource they have spent on managing a situation has just become irrelevant. Elias put his notebook back under his arm. He unplugged the device and put it in the canvas bag. He looked at the Aureon V-Nine on the platform. Quiet now, stable, doing what it had always been designed to do when you left all its parts intact. He thought about his father. Samuel Turner had never seen the inside of a room like this. Had never been invited to one. He had spent 40 years in a building with a faded sign on 8 Mile Road, fixing other people's machines, asking for nothing but the work and the satisfaction of doing it correctly. He had taught Elias that a machine didn't know what you looked like or what neighborhood you came from, or whether your name was on a patent. A machine only knew whether you understood it or not. Elias understood this one. He had always understood it. They had just spent 11 years pretending otherwise. Lena Brooks came to stand beside him. She kept her voice low, because the room was still in motion, and neither of them needed to be the center of it right now. The board's counsel is already on the phone, she said. Victor Lang left through the side door about 3 minutes ago. Someone from press just told me Cassandra's communications team has gone dark. Elias nodded. I'm going to publish tonight, Lena said. I have the garage footage, the override screen, your notebook, Nolan's statement. I want your comment before I go. What do you want people to understand about this? He thought for a moment. The car was always safe, he said. I designed it to be safe. The only way it became dangerous was when someone decided that what it could do was more important than what it was supposed to protect. That's not an engineering problem. That's a values problem. She wrote it down. And the garage? Your shop? He looked at her. Turner & Sons has been there for 43 years. It'll still be there next week. He walked out of the Meridian Technology Center the same way he had walked in, without ceremony, without an escort, without a suit. He walked to where he had parked, a decade-old pickup truck 2 blocks north, and he drove back to Detroit through the kind of October afternoon that the city produced with some regularity. Cold, low clouds, the smell of the river somewhere, underneath, everything. 3 months passed the way months pass when a legal process begins, slowly at first, then all at once. The board of Aureon Motors commissioned an independent audit of the Turner Pulse Core lineage within 72 hours of the Meridian event. The audit confirmed, in language more precise than anything Elias could have testified to alone, that the architecture designated Aureon Pulse architecture was derived in full from a design originating with Elias M. Turner, that the patent filings had been structured to obscure that origin, and that the thermal safety layer, known internally as TPC Layer 3, had been disabled at the direction of executives for the purpose of improving demonstration performance, despite documented internal warnings about the safety implications of that decision. Cassandra Vale's position was suspended pending investigation. Victor Lang's consulting contract was terminated. Nolan Pierce cooperated fully with the audit and submitted a written account of everything he had known and when he had known it. He kept his job, though in a different form, in a role that involved, among other things, rebuilding the safety documentation that had been managed into invisibility over the preceding years. The settlement that Aureon Motors eventually reached with Elias Turner was confidential in its financial terms. What was not confidential, because Elias had insisted it be made public as a condition of agreement, was the following: the formal attribution of Turner Pulse Core to Elias M. Turner as originating architect, the mandatory restoration of the thermal mercy layer across all V-Nine units prior to any commercial sale, the establishment of a technical training program for independent automotive technicians which is in Detroit metropolitan area, funded by Aureon Motors and administered through a partnership with 3 community colleges, and a line in the Aureon V-Nine owner's manual, in every edition, on the page describing the safety system. Architecture designed by Elias M. Turner, Turner Pulse Core, original design. Turner & Sons Auto Repair did not become a showroom. Elias repainted the sign, the same lettering, the same placement, the same 2 bay doors. He had Deshawn help with the painting on a Saturday morning, and when they were done, stood back and looked at it. And it looked like itself. Inside the garage, on the wall above the second bay workbench, they hung a board with his father's words painted on it in the same dark blue that the original sign had been. Cars don't lie. You just have to be patient enough to listen. Twice a week, a group of young technicians came in to learn the electric vehicle curriculum that Elias was helping to build. Not just how to run diagnostics on proprietary systems, but how to read base layer signals, how to understand the architecture beneath the interface, how to think about a machine's design the way its designer thought about it. Some of them were recent graduates, some were experienced mechanics who had been fixing internal combustion engines for 20 years and were learning a new vocabulary. Some were teenagers who weren't yet sure what they were going to do. Elias taught them the way his father had taught him, by listening first and explaining after, by asking what they heard before telling them what to look for. Lena Brooks came back in December to do a follow-up piece. She found the garage busy, 3 cars in the bays, one of them an Aureon V-Nine, that had been brought in by one of the company's own field engineers for a routine check by the man who understood it better than anyone. She found Elias at the back workbench, with the black notebook open, explaining a thermal flow diagram to a 20-year-old who was taking photographs of the pages on her phone. He looked up when Lena came in. "I wanted to ask you one more thing," she said, "for the record." He set down his pencil. "After all of this, the audit, the settlement, the attribution, how do you want to be identified? Engineer? Inventor? Founder?" He thought about it for a moment. He thought about his father. He thought about 43 years of a sign that nobody had taken down. He thought about the Mustang in the corner of the lot, which he had started working on again in the evenings, slowly, with patience the way his father had. "Call me a mechanic," he said. "But this time, make sure you understand what that means." Lena wrote it down. In the lot outside, the '66 Mustang sat in the gray winter light. The fender on the driver's side was newly primed, a flat gray that stood clean, against the original paint, waiting. On the key hook inside the first bay, a new tag had been added beside the old leather fob. A small brass ring, holding the key to the Aureon V-Nine, that the field engineer had left for inspection. The two keys hung side by side, one from the beginning of what he had learned, one from the end of what they had tried to take. Some things survive the people who try to bury them. They survive because they are not dependent on being recognized to be real. The work is real whether or not the name is attached. The design is true whether or not the credit follows. What cannot be taken, even when everything else is the understanding. The knowledge of how a thing works, why it works, and what it costs when someone removes the part that was built to protect people. Elias Turner had always known the cost. He had built the protection in because he believed, in the plainest and most durable way, that knowing how to stop a machine, or before it hurts someone, is not a limitation on what the machine can do. It is the fullest expression of what engineering is supposed to be. They had called him a garage mechanic when it served them, and a liability when it didn't, and said nothing when the system he built saved 163 people from finding out what happens when ambition removes the part that says enough. In the end, the machines he built told the truth about him. They always do, for the people who know how to listen.